Then the Buddha says, they didn't practice skillfully. Then he teaches mindfulness of meditation. I have to say that incident seems so strange to me because like any skillful meditation teacher knows that if one teaches the Asubha meditation as a full-time meditation, one shouldn't just abandon the new practitioners to their own devices, but one should be available for consultation. So how could the Buddha go into seclusion right after teaching that?
Wasn't Venerable Sariputta around also?
That's also another...
I can't imagine Venerable Ananda or Venerable Sariputta who knew what they were doing. It just doesn't ring right.
Yeah, that's also the other thing that occurred to me. Even if the Buddha went into seclusion, there would have been other advanced monks around to give advice, like Sariputta, Moggallana, Ananda, Maha-Assapura. About killing.
Yeah.
Well, actually, this forms the background, strangely, if I remember, for the Buddha to also lay down the rule, the Vinaya rule, against taking a human life.
Maybe it's exposition, from the later redactor.
I get the impression that that's the case. But one thing that is true, what I said earlier, that the Asubha, the meditation on the body, it's not recommended for those who have a kind of morose or depressive person, who have the morose or gloomy personality or who are subject to depression. But it's for those who are more the hot, excitable, sensual, those with the sensual temperament. And initially it should be practiced under conditions where one can consult an experienced teacher. But if one has practiced meditation for a long time with other subjects, and you just do short periods of the Asubha meditation, it's all right. I don't think that will prove dangerous. Okay, any other questions from the people here? Yeah. 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 Yeah, there are actually different words in Pali. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, this is an interesting point. The Pali word that occurs in the explanation of the first hindrance in paragraph 13, it's translated covetousness, it's abhijja. And often that means any kind of craving. But then when the other texts enumerate the 5 hindrances, they use the word kama chanda, which specifically means sensual desire. So we can understand that the word abhijja, or English covetousness, can take on different meanings in different contexts. So as the first hindrance, it seems, maybe it has both a narrow meaning as sensual desire and also a broader meaning as any kind of craving. So somebody, say, who had come from a wealthy family and entered upon the monastic life might start thinking about how comfortable and easy his life was when he was living amidst the luxuries of his wealth without being obsessed by specific sensual thoughts.
Isn't avijja usually translated as ignorance?
No, that is avijja.
Avijja.
This is abhijja.
Oh, abhijja.
Avijja, a different word. Okay, I will go on now to the next hindrance. This is ill will. Okay, ill will, as I explained, is anger, hatred, which arises from careless attention to something disagreeable, unpleasant, or repugnant. And so the remedy for this is what's called the liberation of the mind through loving kindness, or the meditation on metta bhavana. And so to develop this meditation, again, the texts work out a particular strategy or method. They explain that one develops loving kindness towards people representing different groups, first to oneself, then towards a dear and respected person, then to a close friend, then to a neutral person, and then finally to a hostile person. After one masters, or after one becomes skilled in developing loving kindness to all of these individuals, then one broadens the loving kindness by generating it towards different geographical areas, then to the 4 or 6 directions, and then finally one is able to extend the loving kindness to the whole world. So one then abides, suffusing the whole world with the mind of loving kindness. And so if somebody is trying to practice meditation, say on mindfulness of breathing, if some angry thoughts, resentful thoughts, thoughts of ill will arise, initially, in the beginning, one just notes them, lets them go, and tries to come back to the breath. But if you've been practicing for some time, and you notice a strong tendency towards ill will in the character, regular thoughts of like anger, hatred arise, then you can temporarily put aside the mindfulness of breathing and develop the meditation on loving kindness, working through it systematically. Or even what is good to do as a daily practice, say if you're sitting for 50 minutes, you could do either at the beginning 10 minutes of loving kindness meditation, or at the end 10 minutes of loving kindness meditation. So when you do the loving kindness meditation, it helps to make the mind very soft, very gentle, very malleable. And so it helps with the practice of any meditation subject. And then if you find this meditation subject sort of congenial to your character, you could just use it as your primary meditation subject. And it's a very joyful, very uplifting meditation. Okay, then coming to the simile, we have, now I'm on top of page 367, we take the case of a man who is afflicted, suffering, gravely ill, and his food doesn't agree with him, and his body has no strength. Okay, then later he recovers from his illness, and his food agrees with him, and his body gains its strength. And then when he considers this, then he becomes full of joy. So here, ill will is compared to an affliction, an illness. And being free from ill will is like recovering from the illness. Okay, so this is ill will. I'll finish all 5 of the hindrances, then I'll ask for questions. Okay, the next third hindrance is called, here it's translated sloth and torpor, elsewhere it's translated dullness and drowsiness. So these are actually 2 different mental factors which are very closely associated. Dullness is like the heaviness of mind or rigidity of mind, so that the mind just can't focus, it gets, I compare it, this kind of mind, it's like the day when the sky is this gray, it's not raining, not distinct clouds in the sky, but the sky is just all over, it's like this leaden gray, and you get this heavy feeling in the body. That's like the dullness, where the mind just is not malleable, not flexible, but very stuffy and dull. And after one is in this dull state for some time, even a few minutes, then one starts to get drowsy. This isn't the drowsiness that comes as the prelude to sleep at the end of the day when you're starting to get really tired and sleepy. But even if you had a good night's sleep and you feel quite vigorous in the morning or in the afternoon, whatever, then you sit down to meditate and suddenly one starts to get drowsy, and then you're sleeping. But you sometimes, maybe not falling into deep sleep, but there come these little moments where you seem to drift off into a kind of sleeping state. So that is the drowsiness. Okay, so then there are various antidotes to this dullness and drowsiness. And one of them mentioned here is called being percipient of light. Or the specific method is called the perception of light. This is aloka sanya in Pali. And so to overcome this, what one does is, to overcome the dullness and drowsiness, one gets the image of a light. It could be from looking at the sun. Don't stare at the sun, but you can just look at the sun for a few seconds to get the image of the bright globe of the sun, or look at the full moon, or you can look at an electric light, especially one that's white light like this, or even the flame of a candle. Don't stare at the light, but just look at it for 10 or 15 seconds just to get the image of the light. Then one visualizes that light with one's mind's eye and tries to see it becoming brighter and brighter. If one loses the image of the light, then one can look at the real light again for a few seconds, then close the eyes and see the light with one's mind's eye. And sometimes if one does this, then one gets a very clear and distinct impression of light in the mind, and that will dispel the dullness and drowsiness. But other texts mention some other methods of overcoming dullness and drowsiness. One of them is to leave the sitting meditation and to do vigorous walking meditation. Not the very slow walking meditation where you're lifting, pushing, putting down, pressing. Because if you're doing it very slowly, you can still get dull and drowsy and then think, why should I be walking? Let me sit down again. Why should I be sitting? I can meditate much better by lying down. But one walks vigorously, fairly quickly, just being aware of right step, left, right, left. And when one does this, then one arouses one's energy. And one can even keep up the walking meditation for a half an hour or even 45 minutes or an hour. Don't think that if one is walking, one isn't doing real meditation, that you could only do real meditation if you're sitting. There are many records in the text of meditators who reach enlightenment through the walking meditation. Okay, then the fourth hindrance is the opposite of dullness and drowsiness. This is called uddhacca kukucca, restlessness and remorse. Restlessness means mental agitation, just having constant thoughts flowing through the mind, random thoughts, agitated thoughts, worried thoughts. And then the other, its counterpart, remorse, means when one has done something wrong, especially transgressing one of the precepts, then sometimes the mind is constantly dwelling on the wrong that one has done, and one gets this kind of scratching in the mind. I shouldn't have done that, I should have done that. And that is a disturbance that prevents the mind from settling on its object. And so what the texts say is that the actual standard text is not very helpful. It says simply, abandoning restlessness and remorse, he abides unagitated with a mind inwardly peaceful. And then the text, the other suttas say, one overcomes restlessness and remorse by careful attention to peace of mind. Again, it's not so helpful, it's easier said than done. But what other meditation teachers recommend is choosing a meditation subject that helps to focus the mind, and then using a skillful device to keep the mind connected to that meditation subject. So what they usually recommend is being mindful of breathing and counting the breaths from 1 to 5 or 1 to 10. And then when one gets to 10, then one goes back to 1 and counts up to 10 again. If one loses track of the counting, one starts again at 10. And by setting oneself this task of counting the breaths, one keeps extremely attentive to the count, and that helps to tie the mind to the breath and prevents it from wandering. So that is one method that the texts recommend, is mindfulness of breathing with counting of the breaths. But another method that I found on my own that is very useful to overcome restlessness and remorse is the meditation on the qualities of the Buddha. You can just take a nice, attractive Buddha image. You don't have to be able to visualize it like the Tibetan lamas, being able to see every detail, but just get the impression of the calm, peaceful, blissful, compassionate face and figure of the Buddha, and just turn over in the mind again and again the qualities of the Buddha. Can be whatever qualities appeal to you. We say the peaceful one, the purified one, the wise one, or just think over the enlightened one, the Buddha, Buddha. Always keeping that inspiring and pure image of the Buddha in your mind's eye. And that will help all of these restless thoughts, worried thoughts, to settle down, and the mind becomes calm and uplifted. Yeah?
Yeah, restlessness and remorse are counted together because they both prevent single-pointed concentration. But then the other two also.
Yeah.
I'm wondering why, when, how eradicated this restlessness, the path of arahantship, remorse, the path of the non-returner, that is, since if they really are dealt with or eradicated at different points, then why are they considered together?
Okay. All of the 5 factors here are obstacles to concentration, but dullness and drowsiness are joined because they are factors which, we could say, that pull the mind down, that drag the mind down, whereas restlessness and remorse are alike in causing agitation of the mind or disturbance of the mind. They function in a similar way, but there's a difference in tone between them. Okay, the 5th hindrance is doubt. And so, it said that abandoning doubt, he abides, having gone beyond doubt, unperplexed about wholesome states or wholesome qualities. And then the text, or the chart that I've made up, explains what is the primary condition for doubt. And it says careless attention to things that are a basis for doubt. Again, this isn't so self-evident, but what it means is not being able to distinguish properly what is wholesome, what is unwholesome, what is an obstacle to one's practice, what is of benefit to one's practice, what should be cultivated, what should be abandoned. And so the primary antidote to doubt, well, one antidote that's recommended is said to be much learning, that is to study the Dharma, so that one knows from consulting various texts what are the unwholesome qualities, like the 5 hindrances, or the 10 fetters, or the 7 latent tendencies, and then what are the wholesome qualities, like the 4 foundations of mindfulness, the 4 right efforts, the 5 spiritual faculties. And so when one gets a good knowledge of the text, or has access to good teachers who could clear up what are obstacles, what are aids to the practice, then one will be able to overcome doubt and advance in the practice. But I would distinguish between 2 kinds of doubt. One is doubt in the sense of having real questions about the teaching. And those are the questions that one should try to settle by either by study of the text or by going to a qualified teacher and discussing these questions and problems that one has. So those are genuine doubts, or maybe call them intellectual doubts. The second kind of doubt is what maybe we could call skeptical doubt, cynical doubt, or obsessive doubt. And I've noticed that certain people have this problem, that they can never really settle their mind on the practice. But whenever they sit down to practice, questions just come into the mind and obsess them. And even if you answer 100 questions of theirs, it'll be followed by the next 100 questions. And so this is the kind of person who thinks too much. So what do you do with that kind of meditator? Venerable Chipananda? Well, what I advise the person to do, just notice the doubt and drop the doubt. Fang xia. Drop it. Right? Let it go. If you're doubting, just note. Doubt. And just look into the mind that's doubting. Just observe the mind that's doubting. Good answer. Yeah, if one has the problem with this kind of obsessive doubt, you can just watch the mind doubting. Just watch the way the mind is tying itself up in knots and tangles. And observing this can become a very interesting process. You get to understand, see the subtle little tricks of the mind that, when you sit down to meditate, it's like all these little obstacles that have been sort of hiding behind the curtain of the mind now start coming out into the open and working and becoming active. And so if one just observes them, particularly this obsessive doubt, you just see it as a kind of mental activity. And after some time of observation, those doubts will start settling down, becoming quiet, and then the mind will settle down. Okay, any questions now on any of the 5 hindrances. Anything said? If you feel shy about asking me, we have a very accomplished meditation master.
Yeah, I want to get a little chip in on there. What neighborhood from Brooklyn does he?
Beg your pardon. I'm not from Brooklyn. I'm not from the Bronx.
That's not.
I'm from San Francisco, Golden Gate Park.
No, you're not.
Yes. I used to work in Silicon Valley and go back to live at night in the park.
Okay, we've got a serious question, or whichever Bante.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of these hindrances, it's really not that hard if you're sitting in meditation to just put them aside.
Yeah.
I can do that. But then when I'm in daily life, ill will and doubt. That's just me. I don't really have sadha. I don't have anything. So it's just, so you can sit in your little room and push it aside and get into states and all that. Well, that's nice, but it doesn't do anything for real life necessarily. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I understand what you're saying.
What do you do?
But you can apply, when ill will arises in everyday life, the antidote is not any different from the antidote in meditation. You just apply the loving kindness that you develop in meditation, you apply it to the situation of real life, of everyday life. So,
Yeah, but you don't even have to necessarily apply it in meditation. You just put it aside and meditate and concentrate on the breath.
I see. Well, what I would say is that if you have problems, if you have problem with ill will in everyday life, then you can do the loving kindness meditation as the sitting meditation, as a full. Don't roll the eyes. I could roll my eyes too. No, seriously, do it as a regular meditation practice. And that builds up what I would call the strength or power of loving kindness. So that, first of all, that when you build up that strength, then in everyday situations, the ill will doesn't arise so frequently or so strongly. And then if it does arise, then you could just bring the mind into the mode of the loving kindness meditation. And then one will overcome that right on the spot, the ill will, through bringing up that mode of loving kindness meditation in the midst of activity. Okay, that's with ill will, with doubt. I mean, if the doubt comes up in day-to-day life, write out the questions and...
It's just when you review all this stuff when I study and revise.
Well, when questions come up, that's good. That means that one is reading attentively and examining. That's what I would call the good kind, the investigative doubt. But the kind that's the kind of doubt that leads to deeper understanding and to wisdom. But it's what I call the obsessive doubt, which is not really motivated by unclear understanding, but it's almost, I call it a trick or strategy of Mara, just to cause disturbance in the mind.
On the spot, metta meditation is, for me, probably more valuable than metta doing a formal meditation.
Yeah, but that could be true, but in order to build up, what I would say, to build up the force and skill in metta, it's helpful to do it as a formal meditation in the sitting posture. Of course, if you have naturally a strong inclination to metta, then you might be able to bring it up right on the spot. But some people, I should say, some of us who started off with very angry temperaments, very irritable temperaments, found it necessary to start practicing metta as a sitting meditation. Then we could bring it up in the midst of day-to-day activity.
said it's also a concentration practice. You can actually go into jhana.
It's a concentration practice, so if one develops it in a sustained...
It's a very sweet way to go into.
Yeah, it's a very sweet or joyful or pleasant meditation.
It doesn't go deep into the jhanas, but there's only a certain level there.
It says that it goes up to the third jhana. Well, if that's not deep enough, then...
Okay, I always read that, the Venerable Sariputta really, really pushed. You want to get to the jhanas and the material states, breath. You can do kasina, you can do metta, but
Yeah.
really, the Venerable Sariputta really just said, "You want to do it? That was their recommendation."
Yeah, but different people have different inclinations.
What if it works for you?
The breath. Then don't say with it. Yeah. I'm not saying that you have to do that. Yes?
For me, it appears that you could say there's one hindrance, and that is we don't know where our attention is. I know, especially for me, when I walk through daily life, I don't have sensual desire arising while I'm sitting, but when I'm walking around in Manhattan, it's arising hundreds of times.
Yeah.
I don't know where my attention is, and so it's almost like a prerequisite to the antidote is that I become aware that I do not know where my attention is, and then I can place it properly and continue to be aware of it. Now, how can I become aware that I don't know where my attention is more often? Would that be where the vipassana part of meditation comes in?
Well, what's useful in the midst of activity to keep one's attention from wandering is the practice which was described earlier from page 365 to 66 is called mindfulness and clear comprehension. So that means when one engages in any activity, one keeps one's attention on that activity. So even if one is, say, walking down the streets of Manhattan, one just can attend to the act of walking. Or even to keep the mind more focused, you keep special attention on the touch sensation on the feet as you go, as each foot presses on the ground. Of course, if you're walking through the streets of Manhattan, you have to have a wider attention than that. If you're just completely concentrated on the touch sensation of the feet on the ground, then you can get run over by a car or bump into people. But to prevent the mind from wandering in too many different directions, you keep kind of general awareness of the act of walking, and with a little more specific focus on the touch of the feet. Or it could be anything that seems to anchor your mind. It could even be like on the whole form of the body as you're walking. And similarly, when engaged in any other kind of activity, make the effort to keep the attention on that activity. Then the mind won't go wandering in different directions. Okay, we can take maybe one more question, then I think we'll have to stop. Okay, maybe we'll take two. First one, then we'll take you next.
Thank you. Concerning restlessness and remorse, if a Christian had this problem and they went to clergy, the direct response would be...
Maybe it's better if you take this microphone.
No, just talk louder. Concerning restlessness and remorse,
Yeah.
if a Christian had this difficulty and went to clergy, the answer would directly be look for self-forgiveness, look for forgiveness. But that's not a response for the Buddhists, to look for forgiveness within yourself, to forgive yourself.
Yeah, okay, I see. You're saying if a Christian...
If a Christian had this problem of restlessness and remorse,
Yeah.
and they went to a clergy,
Yeah.
a Christian clergy,
Yeah.
Christian clergy would suggest to them to try to find self-forgiveness, to forgive themselves. But that isn't really dealt with in Buddhist religion or anything. I was just wondering why that is.
I know of different methods that are suggested to overcome the sense of remorse. One is to do a kind of, this actually develops later in Mahayana Buddhism, is to do a kind of they call it in Chinese Chan Wei, kind of confession and feeling of remorse in front of the Buddha. And so one could do this almost on one's own in front of the Buddha, not like the Buddha's a real person or God in front of you, but it's just developing a particular psychological frame of mind. Because this is what people would do during the time of the Buddha. If somebody acted in a way which was offensive towards the Buddha, then later they realized that they had been behaving wrongly, then they would come to the Buddha and say, please, Bhante, I apologize for my behavior. Please accept my apology. Then the Buddha would say that is a sign of growth, progress and development, that a person recognizes their wrong is wrong and makes amends and makes them determined to behave rightly in the future.
I'm not saying that that's particularly an effective way. I was just wondering what the difference was.
Oh, yeah, so this is one way would be to, in front of the Buddha, to sort of reveal one's fault, if it's something that's more serious, and then make a determination not to repeat it in the future. And then another sort of counteractive would be to do something good and wholesome as a way of counteracting the wrong that one has done.
Right. Well, that's like good works, especially in Catholicism.
That's also recommended in Catholicism. Yeah, so this seems to be general principles of the religious life.
Thank you.
You sort of touched on this when you were talking about investigative doubt versus obsessive doubt.
Yeah.
Because I was reading in here where doubt is one of the hindrances, and then one of the other suttas, the Buddha specifically says, don't believe in this because I said it, you don't believe in this because someone else said it,
Yeah.
which also seems to be a form of doubt.
Yeah.
And I was just wondering if you can elaborate on the difference.
Yeah. I think that sort of ties into that distinction I made between investigative doubt and obsessive doubt. In that sutta, actually, before the Buddha makes that statement, he's speaking to the people called the Kalamas, and he says to the Kalamas, it is right for you to doubt. It is right for you to be perplexed. Doubt has arisen in you about matters that create doubt. Then he says, do not go by oral tradition, do not go by a lineage of teachers, do not go by hearsay, and so on. So, in the case of investigative doubt, then that's a quite proper kind of doubt. But sometimes when one does an extensive investigation, and all of one's doubts are resolved intellectually, but still these kind of obsessive questions come up. The way to deal with that is a meditative exercise, is just to observe the doubting mind. And if it's really an intellectual doubt, you just make the note, after I come out from meditation, then I'm going to make some investigations about this point. But don't just keep on, don't just go on sitting there thinking, is it this way, is it that way, why is this, what is this? Not useful. Okay, I think there was one internet question. Okay, it says, forgiveness is important to overcome remorse. Is there any specific Buddhist method to practice forgiveness? Actually, this is actually used within the Buddhist system. Often when one begins practicing the metta, loving-kindness meditation, one thinks to oneself, if I have done wrong to anyone in any way, in my mind I ask them to forgive me, and if there's anyone who has done wrong to me, I forgive them. In this way one, at least mentally, sort of resolves any kind of tensions, hang-ups, hassles that one has had with other people. Okay, I think we'll have to stop now, and we'll have to stop for the day. Now, next week is November 27th. I think we can have a class next week. Are people tied down by Thanksgiving? Do people go away to... So it's all right. I used to think Thanksgiving weekend, don't have class, everybody is gone to California. Everybody goes to California or to Florida. Maybe it isn't true. So we'll have the class to finish the Sutta next week. Okay, so we end by sharing the merits. So I'm going to recite some verses to share the merits with the Gala protecting deities, the dragon spirits, the fierce spirits, and all other beings. Akasata chabumata deva naga mahidika punyantang anumoditva chiram rakantu sasanam. Akasata chabumata deva naga mahidika punyantang anumoditva chiram rakantu desanam. Akasata chabumata deva naga mahidika punyantang anumoditva chiram rakantu mam param. Etavatacham hehi sampadam punya sampadam sabbe devanumodantu sabbe bhudanumodantu sabbe satanumodantu sabba sampati siddhya bhavagupadaya vichihetato etantare satakayupapanna rupya rupicha asanya sanino dukkha pamuchantu pusantu nibhuting. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.